sejarah. Ready to fight this ya only Armageddon.
Bob Marley Lecture, Global Reggae Conference 2017, University of West Indies, Kingston, Jamaica. 1976. Bob Marley is the most important person in the world. Presented by David Dusty Cupples in association with the Bob Marley Museum. Hi, that's me, David. I'm the author of Stir It Up, The CIA Targets Jamaica, Bob Marley and the Progressive Manly Government, a novel of history, music, roots, and culture, highly praised by Roger Steffens and other notables. I've revised the lecture and I'm re-recording it here. So without further ado, I come from the land of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Hism schism. The good news, as reggae superstar Bushman sings, I know the West will crumble one day, so Jah say, so I and I now say. We understand this as a metaphor, meaning it is the system of greed and oppression which must crumble, not that the people of the West should suffer. As Bob Marley sang, I and I not come to fight flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high and low places. Bushman's message is also the bad news, because to a great extent, how it goes with the West determines how it goes for the world. Trump versus Sanders symbolizes this great struggle for the future, which will affect every corner of the globe. Does Sanders remind you of someone from Jamaica's past? Hold that thought and we'll come back to it. 1976. Bob Marley is the most important person in the world. This is meant as an intellectual exercise, not to be taken as strictly true or false. A thought problem. Come, we go reason now. Most important to whom? Babylon, of course, the US-dominated system that runs the show. To get into this, we need a corollary hypothesis, also not to be taken as strictly true or false. 1976, Jamaica is the most important place in the world, again, in the eyes of the United States. Is that crazy? Well, let's take a look. The Vietnam War is over. The Soviet Union and Berlin Wall are about on their last legs. Nixon has opened China. Brutal right-wing military dictatorships have most of Latin America under control. With the help of Nazis, the United States smuggled out of Germany after the fall of Hitler's Third Reich. Salvador Allende has been destroyed in Chile with the help of the CIA. The fascist generals are in charge in Argentina. Apartheid South Africa is putting down the Soweto uprising, invading Angola, and terrorizing all of southern Africa. A crippling embargo has Cuba in shackles. Things are pretty much locked down. Babylon is happy. Except Babylon is never happy. There's always that voracious appetite for more. More money, more power, more control. Always that paranoia about someone beating us to it. Here comes Michael Manley with his democratic socialism, buddying up to Fidel Castro and refusing to bow before the United States. The idea that Jamaica is such a hotspot suddenly doesn't seem so crazy. Yeah, Israel is in a whole different league, Egypt as well. But we pump billions into those countries, and getting rid of Manley might only take a few million and a handful of CIA agents, or 2 handfuls, if you know what I mean. How do we research this? The mainstream media is owned by rich people and rich corporations in the business of getting richer. Are they going to feed us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Establishment spokespersons promote establishment values, especially in their editorials and commentary. I'm not saying you shouldn't read your New York Times or Chicago Tribune or local newspaper. Sometimes they do great investigative reporting, like Gary Webb breaking the story of the CIA running crack cocaine into black neighborhoods to support the Contra war against the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. Fake news, which we've been hearing a lot about lately, historically has been a tool of power, of the system. A CIA ploy, for example. The mainstream media wraps the lies in ribbons of noble ideals and heroic sacrifice and spoon feeds it to the people. Has the mainstream media taught us that Bob Marley is a great world hero and Babylon's system is a vampire, sucking the blood of the sufferer and the children, graduating thieves and murderers? A lot of people get it. Really feeling Bob's vibe can alter your whole worldview, change who you are, make you a better person. In the mainstream, Bob is a dread with a spliff and a smile. A wannabe Che Guevara, putting on a show to sell records. Not someone whose words and actions should be perused, studied, taken to heart. In this sense, I believe Bob Marley is vastly underrated. Wait, the king of reggae? Underrated? Yes, absolutely. Even many reggae fans may not get that Babylon is reality and not some abstract floating cloud of injustice out there somewhere. People want to say Peter Tosh was the revolutionary and Bob was just the spiritual crusader. I don't buy that. True, Peter was the angry young man who shouted and cursed and got beaten to an inch of his life. Bob came at it in a more subdued manner, but he was fighting all the while. In his lyrics, his actions, his magnificent humanitarianism, which in a dog-eat-dog capitalist world is surely a revolutionary act. Bob was tactical. He who fight and run away, live to fight another day. Hit and run, like the Maroons. Pick the time and place wisely so you can win. Bob put his life on the line for the people. Smile Jamaica, the One Love Peace concert, maybe the entire duration of the 1970s tribal wars. He dealt with heavy gangsters as brothers and reasoned with them like a United Nations mediation team trying to stop the bloodshed. As it turned out, it was his blood that was shed in his own home. Anyway, the Rosses don't like comparing one against the other, so we'll leave it at that. People also say Bob wasn't political. That is true. Bob said so himself. The ugliness of politics wasn't something he would ever get involved in. The self-interested machinations, the corruption and lesser of two evils, the power grabs, the bribes. But we shouldn't get lost in semantics, in the tyranny of words. Politics is basically a system for enacting policy that creates and maintains a society. Are we saying Bob didn't care about the society? He cared deeply. We wouldn't be talking about him if he didn't. So if Michael Manley stood up and said, as he did, we're going to send the kids to school and expand health care and give farmland to the poor, and Seaga said, oh no, we're going to play Babylon's game and cut social services, who do you think Bob would agree with? Saying Bob wasn't political, as if that summed the matter up, is another way, in my opinion, of saying Bob wasn't the great warrior against the system. Another way of underrating the man. As Rita says, when Bob's singing, he's fighting a war. We know what he's fighting for. Rasta, Africa Unite, Black Man Redemption, One Love. For this alone, he is a world hero. But what is Bob fighting against? Babylon, yes, the system, but what does that mean? You won't find the answer in the Gleaner or Channel 7 News or the New York Times or Rolling Stone. You won't even find the question raised. The Marley film didn't say a word about neoliberal economics, the IMF, enforced austerity, structural adjustment, the free zones, the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny, the CIA destabilizing the Manley government. The vampire sucking the blood of the children is not a figment of Bob's imagination. If we don't understand what Bob was fighting against, we don't understand the essence of the man. David is not David without Goliath. We can't just say Bob was fighting injustice. We need specifics and interpretation and historical perspective. We have to talk about this unjust system, map it out, and get to its core. Bob says, yes, you must understand the lyrics. See them bribing with their guns, spare parts, and money. Divide and rule could only tear us apart. Rasta don't work for no CIA. But there are so much things to say right now. So much things to say. To understand the system, we have to go beyond the mainstream media to independent journalists and scholars who search for the truth behind the propaganda and have the courage to speak out. People like your wonderful Professor Mike Witter here at UWI talking about the mechanism of debt. Independent media can be found on the internet and sometimes TV. Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, Common Dreams, Truth Out, Truth Dig, Black Agenda Report, The Intercept, some others. The hallmark of independent media is the willingness to criticize both sides, all sides. People are waking up that runaway capitalism is thievery and oppression. Still, the mainstream tells us that anything to the left is evil and doomed to fail. That a system of providing for the common good, as stipulated in the United States Constitution, is not to be implemented but shunned, disparaged as something destructive, wicked socialism to be beaten down, with violence if necessary. We are told helping poor people, feeding the homeless, and health care for all is misguided and depraved. The Catholic Church has done some horrible things, but in the 1970s, liberation theology priests made a real effort to help the poor in Central America. They were promptly condemned as communist, even by the Pope, and deserved whatever bad things happened to them, like the 4 U.S. churchwomen that were raped and murdered in El Salvador. Archbishop Romero shot down in cold blood while giving Mass days after he'd begged Jimmy Carter, Christian to Christian, to stop arming the death squads. Please, Mr. President, they are butchers. Carter, the human rights president. Did the U.S. stop arming the death squads? No. Women, children, the elderly massacred by the right-wing militias. Farmers, activists, college students and their families slaughtered by the thousands. And we are told they were the evil ones for wanting a better price at market, or a living wage, or a better education, the bare minimum to lead a decent life. When the Sandinistas overthrew the Somoza regime in Nicaragua after half a century of oppression and theft, and the new government tried to help the people instead of conforming to the U.S. business model, and succeeded in helping the people, dramatically succeeded. We were told the Sandinistas were bloodthirsty savages. Allende in Chile, much the same. Maurice Bishop, Grenada. Aristide, Haiti. Arbenz, Guatemala. Lumumba, Congo. Michael Manley, Jamaica. Anybody who tries to make life better for the people is the enemy, and here comes the CIA to save the day. More recently, Honduras, Venezuela, Brazil, Bolivia. The beat goes on. And if you stand up and speak the truth, you're marginalized, discredited, and worse. We know what happened to Gary Webb. One of the best sources of truth is Noam Chomsky, the world's top intellectual, it has been said. His Manufacturing Consent may be the most important book since the printing press. He uses his academic training to research for facts instead of spouting opinions off the top of his head like ignorant TV commentators and their paid experts. One thing Chomsky does is pay attention to what big shots say among themselves when no one is listening, as may be revealed in classified documents, which after a period of time are declassified and can be read. George Kennan, one of the heads of the U.S. State Department after World War II, wrote, "We have 6% of the world's population and 50% of the wealth. Our task is to maintain this disparity, not eliminate or minimize the disparity. We should stop talking about human rights, raising the living standards, and democracy. We are going to have to deal in straight power concepts. In other words, rule the world by force. Spreading democracy? Looks like Burger King isn't the only source of Whoppers. Democracy's okay in Jamaica, as long as you don't raise that minimum wage, which is $1.50 an hour or less in 2019, or think about building hospitals or schools after we take what we want. You won't have money for that." Kennan again. U.S. foreign policy must protect our raw materials, by which he means Venezuela's oil and Brazil's silver and gold and Nicaragua's rubber or whatever. That bauxite you thought was yours? No, that's ours. This is what we're up against. Poor Iraq. All that oil, they didn't stand a chance. How did our oil get under their sand? And Peter Tosh, Africa the richest place, Africans the poorest race, and to me it's a big disgrace. There's a powerful section in former First Lady Beverly Manley's book, The Manley Memoirs, where she talks about Salvador Allende in Chile. Allende wanted a higher royalty from Anaconda and the copper companies, just like Michael Manley wanted a fair share from the bauxite companies. Bev writes that Allende said, "All I want from Big Copper is that every child in the country should be able to have 1 glass of milk a day." Wanting to take a little money from corporations and give children milk made Allende a monster in the eyes of United States planners. Kennan goes on to say, "The role of the Third World is to be a source of raw materials and a market for our products. So Jamaica is supposed to export spices and bananas and import U.S. cars and tractors, and somehow that magically balances out. Oh, and our surplus potatoes, too. Jamaica already grows potatoes? No, you got to take ours." Stephanie Black's film, Life and Debt, doesn't say a word about Bob Marley, but it teaches more about Bob than the Marley film because it sheds light on the system Bob was fighting against. The buzz Bernie Sanders generated in 2016 and again now for 2020 must have reminded folks who can remember of the excitement around Michael Manley. There was real hope for change, a better life, but still, many in Jamaica were terrified Michael Manley would turn the rock into communist hell. Tribal war rages in the streets and tenement yards as the elections near. Opposition candidate Edward Seaga repeatedly claimed the CIA was not in Jamaica in the 1970s. I have never claimed Seaga was in cahoots with the CIA. I have never claimed Seaga was not in cahoots with the CIA. But this is what they do, and they don't sleep on the job. It's inconceivable the CIA was not in Jamaica, destabilizing the Manley government. It just can't be. Like night follows day. Destabilization meaning nothing less than covert operations to topple the government. Why would super-rich America worry about Michael Manley in tiny Jamaica, raising the minimum wage and negotiating a slightly better royalty from the bauxite companies? Was it all about Cuba and Manley's friendly stance toward Castro, especially when Fidel sent soldiers to Angola to repel the invading U.S.-backed army of South Africa? Newly independent Angola. Manley and Castro standing tall against Goliath in Angola is a glorious moment in Third World history. This should never be forgotten or minimized. It was true courage and dedication to the struggle against tyranny. Certainly Cuba was a contributing factor, but the point is Manley wasn't playing by the rules. Chomsky says it's the threat of a successful example. If Manley's programs raised the standard of living of the Jamaican people, Guyana would want to do the same, and Colombia, and Brazil, and Venezuela, and this cannot be allowed. If there wasn't any such thing as Cuba, Manley would still have had to go. What about Bob in 1976? Rolling Stone names the Wailers Band of the Year. Time magazine says Bob is a force to rival the Jamaican government. Bob is definitely high profile. If the CIA can get rid of Manley, fine, Bob can sing his protest songs all he wants. But if it looks like Bob is rallying the people behind Manley with Smile Jamaica and all, he might come under the gun. Shut the man up, get rid of him, whatever is necessary. We know the rankings and their gangs had a lot of power. Manley had the gangs allied to PNP. Seaga had the gangs allied to JLP. Bob Marley had them both. They came into his yard. He would sit and reason with them. Bob was always more comfortable with them than with the politicians. We the street people talking, yeah, we suffering. I'm not saying Bob had the gangsters in the palm of his hand. They loved him, but if they thought he was going over to the other side, he'd be in a whole heap of trouble. Was the CIA behind the December 3rd, 1976 shooting at Bob's Kingston home 2 days before Smile Jamaica and 12 days before the national election? Somebody was bringing guns and cocaine onto the island. The United States wanted Michael Manley out so bad he could spit, and Bob Marley was standing in the way. It was a very dangerous position to be in, of which Bob was well aware. So here it is 1980, and it's Manley-Seaga the rematch. This is really scary, because Ronald Reagan is about to be president. Reagan invaded Grenada, for gosh sake. You can hardly find it on the map. He launched the terrorist Contra War against the new Sandinista government in Nicaragua, killing 40 or 50,000, mostly defenseless civilians. His vice president, Bush I, would go on to invade Panama to dispose of his drug-dealing CIA agent, Noriega. I can almost guarantee you that if Manley had won in 1980, the United States would have invaded Jamaica. Enough people would have died. We've tried today to understand Bob Marley a little better by examining what he was fighting against. Jack Healy of Amnesty International said, "Everywhere I go in the world today, Bob Marley is the symbol of freedom. Bob Dylan deserved his Nobel Prize in Literature, but our Bob deserved it as much, if not more, as well as the Peace Prize. Yes, I'm saying Bob Marley could well have been awarded 2 Nobel Prizes. If the prizes actually mean anything, he certainly should be a Jamaican national hero. So should Michael Manley, who might have lifted up all of the third world on his shoulders if Babylon's knife hadn't been at his throat." Things won't get much better in Jamaica and the former third world countries until significant change takes place in the United States. This will require a major shift toward progressive policy, which fights for equal rights and opportunity, not just in the U.S., but for all around the world. This in turn will require leaders with an understanding of the system Bob Marley fought against and a willingness to stand up against his system. From my studies, that means Bernie Sanders, head and shoulders above anyone else, active in the civil rights movement as far back as the early 60s, arrested protesting for fair housing. Bernie Sanders, like Chomsky, personification of Carl Jung's archetypal old wise man, yet still vigorous and sharp as a tack. The only viable 2020 candidate calling for fair treatment of the Palestinians, something that seems only common decency, but which is almost completely taboo in American politics. Who then do you suppose is likely to care the most about Jamaicans, Nicaraguans, Rwandans, children mining minerals in Congo, as well as Americans tyrannized by corporate oligarchy and neoliberal machinations? I hope people in Jamaica and everywhere else will talk to their friends and family in the U.S. about this and urge them to vote so Michael Manley's promise of better must come may finally be realized. May Bob's One Love vibe guide our journey. Thank you. Couple of things before we sign off. Stir It Up is available from the usual online vendors, or email me for signed copies. Or if you're going to be in Jamaica and want to meet up, talk, or visit sites or whatever, keep an eye out for my GoFundMe project, Jamaica Youth Sports Initiative, hopefully up and running soon. Thanks to my friend Mikey Solja for the music. Please click over and watch this short and very sweet video on Bernie Sanders. Thank you now.
King Selassie, it's the time of revolution. I and me I go fight this. Watch out! Freddie J. was making a long manifesting. It's a time of revelation. I am fighting in this revolution. It's a time of so much confusion. I am believing Rastaman leave a chant down the wicked money. Babylon is falling. I see him dread time. Babylon falling.